Neuwärts FM Transformer wird präsentiert vom Transformationswerk, der Workshop- und Event-Location für Neues. Informationen zu Räumen, Menschen und Methoden auf transformationswerk.de.
Welcome to the playground.
You think you've seen it all? Neuwärts FM.
Ready for transformation? Who says that doesn't work?
And here is your host, Ingo Stoll.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Neuwärts FM Transformer podcast. I am very excited because we haven't seen an international special guest in a while. But today we start the release of the first out of 4 talks from CeBIT 2017. We ramp off with Marcin Kleczynski, one of the Forbes 30 under 30, on the future of cybersecurity, IoT and digital leadership. So without further ado, let's get in with Marcin Kleczynski.
Insights.
Yeah, hello and welcome back. We are today right at the CeBIT, sitting here in the speakers lounge, and I'm very happy to welcome Marcin Kleczynski. You just gave your keynote a couple of minutes ago.
I did. Yeah, it was exhilarating.
Yeah, and I saw, first of all, nobody mentioned it, but I realized you have great pictures within your slides. You know, I know
Dr. Evil.
Dr. Evil, and Back to the Future,
Yep.
and more facts than that. And we have the chance to talk during the next round about like 30-40 minutes in a pretty relaxed atmosphere here. First of all, about cybersecurity and the future of cybersecurity, and on the other hand, a little bit about you as an entrepreneur. Because for those who don't know you, you are the founder and CEO of Malewarebytes. It's one of the fastest growing security companies in Silicon Valley. And you, especially as an entrepreneur, you started pretty early at the age of 14. And, you got a couple of awards. For example, you were named in 2015 as one of the 30 under 13 rising stars of enterprise technology. And one of the latest awards is they named you CEO of the Year 2017 by the Global Excellence Awards. So, what a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me, but I wish they could put my team on those awards as well, because, of course, I could never do this myself.
Yes, that's true. And this is something we're going to explore a little bit later about how do you select your team? How do you lead your team? What's it all about being an entrepreneur half of your life already? Mm-hmm. But maybe start at the beginning with the topic you raised on the stage, on the center stage. I have to read it out because you named your keynote. The title was "The Threat of Global Thermonuclear Cyber Warfare."
I had to pick the craziest title possible, and it was really to drive the point home that, malware and cybercrime, while we see a lot of the commodity stuff, ransomware, it is heading in a direction into an arms race. And I do believe that in 10 years, 20 years, we will be viewing cybercrime as more cyber warfare, as government agencies, nation states get more involved in these types of threats.
We had the chance last year to talk to Mikko Hyppönen, and he talked about war as well.
Yep.
I think he did today as well. So to my personal opinion, it's like, if we talk about security, do we always have to push these war threats, Darkside metaphors to raise the attention that is needed, or is it really that critical?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fear-mongering in the news. You see a cyber threat every week, something potentially plausible, but even 10 years ago, we were talking about nuclear warfare, of course. I don't think so. I don't think we always need to put it in such a negative light. That being said, I think people are just finally taking it seriously. There's more people entering the profession. There's more companies that have board members on them that specialize in cybersecurity. And so it's become a board level discussion. Even in some of the biggest companies, chief information security officers are only a role that's been around for 5 years. So while we shouldn't paint a grim picture because then we become desensitized to it, at the same time, we do need to explain that it is a dire situation. And even more so in my specific keynote today, I'm not talking about nation states going after each other and setting off nuclear weapons through hacking. I think these criminals who are doing this purely for profit are starting to potentially take down, not potentially, we've seen it with the San Francisco Muni, we've seen it with hospitals, police departments, critical infrastructure with a simple commodity attack. So that tells me these companies, these police departments, hospitals, transit systems are so ill-equipped to handle even the most basic attack. What happens when a nation state decides that's my target? All hell will break loose, and that's what I'm worried about as a cybersecurity professional.
So maybe for those of our listeners that are not that much into the IT security market and topic, you talked about ransomware. Mm-hmm. So and you talked about the San Francisco Metro, for example. So please take us a little bit deeper into what happened and what might be the scenario that you may be scared of.
Yeah, I like the idea of taking the San Francisco Metro. So ransomware, as we know, is a threat that gets on your computer and starts encrypting all of the files, your personal data, your pictures, your documents, your CV, and brings a prompt and says, for a large sum of money, we will give you the files back. And
so it's hostage, right?
It's hostage, it's ransom, and it's military grade encryption. So some of the most sophisticated ones are impossible to crack. Imagine applying that to the San Francisco Metro, the 200 computers which were underpowered, not updated, very old systems that were running the ticketing systems were attacked through ransomware. Very simple attack. It was spray and pray, which means it was not targeted. It was just a commodity attack. Took down the entire metro ticketing system, and so all rides were free that day. Now, that's not such a big issue, but it just shows the power these criminals can have, taking down all the ticketing machines and forcing the metro to open the gates. Imagine if it had brought the metro to a halt, that the trains could not run because the other machines that were running the trains were impacted. Or imagine hospitals, which we've seen with Hollywood Presbyterian in Los Angeles. Patient data was encrypted and inaccessible to the point where the hospital panicked and actually paid the ransom. So you start seeing how these criminals are operating. They're throwing a big net out, finding that they're infecting hospitals, police departments, metros. And to me, this is in many ways critical infrastructure. And with ease, they're able to penetrate and actually extort these companies, these hospitals, etc. So I see that getting worse, not better. And we need more examples of these attacks, unfortunately, to really shed light on the issue and get these hospitals and providers of healthcare and transit and you name it, protection, fire and police, to understand what impact it might have. 911 call centers in the U.S. have been down.
That reminds me a little bit about, because we're talking about nuclear energy. So we talk about Fukushima, right?
Right.
So it needed an accident like Fukushima to get out of nuclear power. For example, in Germany, the German chancellor, she decided weeks after she gave a guarantee about having these power plants, these nuclear power plants, even longer running than they were expected to, she took it back and they said, this was happening and it made me change my mind. So we're getting towards new energy formats. So is it something that we need? Is it do we need a even bigger wake-up call than taking down ticketing machines or metro stations?
Yeah, arguably, we've seen proof of concepts, warning signs that this is possible. we've seen hospitals, as I mentioned, but we've also seen individual white hat hackers, people who do this for a living for fun, but also to responsibly disclose. One such hacker claimed he gained access to the engine management system on a flight he was on. Imagine one falling out of the sky. Is that the wake-up call we need? Or a nuclear power plant blowing up? Is that the wake-up call we need? You would think that by now cybersecurity would be taken much more seriously than it is. And for God's sakes, we have ATM cash machines still running Windows XP, which is a product that hasn't been around for 10, 15 years, and Microsoft has stopped patching it. And every time they release a patch for a future operating system, it leaves a treasure map where the vulnerabilities might have been patched for Windows XP and so on. So we're not only running this critical infrastructure on old operating systems, we're actually providing treasure maps for the attackers that want to potentially take these down. So I think the cost isn't, unfortunately, the barrier to updating a lot of these. I was walking through the airport yesterday, and one of the flight information displays actually had Windows 95 running.
Yeah.
I saw the message. I recognized it right away. Windows 95. How many computers that run very important assets in the world today are running on Windows 95 or Windows XP? I don't even want to know.
Or even older, whatever.
Or even older. I don't even want to know.
Yeah. So if this is true, I mean, this is the fact. We grew up with digital technology and we have our learnings, but nobody thought about, the world that we are in here right now 20 years ago. So that's fact. So what is the answer if it's so easy? If it's getting, if everything is getting digitalized in our world, crime will be digitalized as well. So I mean, it's obviously that we see cybercrime even more. So what is the answer? What is our strategy? So do we shut down future technology? Do we try to unplug, and get into the offline world again, or is software the answer? On the other hand,
yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Because we can't have nice things because there are criminals out there that would like to take advantage of that. And if you count the number of police officers in the world, I assure you it far exceeds the number of cybersecurity professionals in the world. And, being a cyber security specialist requires a lot of depth in terms of knowledge, and not that being a police officer is easy, but when it comes to securing assets, you're talking about different platforms, you're talking about thinking like an attacker. It's not really a physical job, it's a mental job, and so degrees are potentially required and learning. So unfortunately, I feel like we're behind on that, and we needed a couple of wake-up calls. I think we've gotten that, and now I think it's slow progress in terms of securing the world, but I really mean it when I say we can't have nice things. Cloud is a very smart way to go. It reduces the need for infrastructure locally, AWS, Azure, there's a lot of different cloud platforms, but companies hesitate to move to those, despite it being, in my mind, a cheaper, a faster alternative, because of the potential of cyber threats. And to me, that's, we as a society, we as a world have our priorities, unfortunately, backwards because criminals exist and take advantage of these. So, long-winded answer to your question, I think we need more cybersecurity professionals. I think we need knowledge transfer. I think millennials are a little bit better with computers, but you can't learn. You're shaking your head a bit there. You can't learn the basics of cybersecurity if you don't even know the basics of technology. And I highly encourage all people that are still in middle school, high school, college to learn programming, because I think it's a nice stepping stone to learning about cybersecurity and the innards of products and how they work, and the innards of websites and how they work. And I think only through the sheer numbers of people that can help all the companies in the world be cybersecurity proficient, that's the only way we can solve this problem.
Let me point out or address to it a different topic, because we said we need to know how it works, right? We need to know programming skills, even in graduate schools, so raising up. And the other thing is like social engineering, not knowing how software can save us, but on the other hand, that we know what the impacts are of what we're doing, or how we deal with passwords, for example, or that we are getting more aware of where the threats are. Because you talked about your mom in the keynote, right? Clicking on every link. Probably this is something that the millennium won't do, because he learned already, or she, that, well, you don't click on every link. But what about smart security and social engineering? So where do we have to change our behavior, or where have to change our attitudes toward security?
I do think technology plays a very critical role in that, in terms of making life easier for us. And we talked a little bit about the driver's license on the internet, having to go through very basic training to even get access to the internet, which realistically I don't think will ever happen, but companies can take their employees that they've just hired and put them through a very basic security program and probably reduce their risk significantly. When it comes to social engineering, it's very effective, and partly because, let's take an email from your insurance provider or from a government agency that you are interacting with right now. These criminals are not stupid. They know what those emails look like. They've copied the templates of those emails. They know what email address they come from, and they've tried to spoof it as well as they could. So you as an individual, unless you're always on the highest of alerts and hover over links and make sure you're not clicking on the wrong stuff, receive an email that looks very legitimate, knows you by name, and what do? Do you just ignore email? That's to your point. Do we just disconnect from the internet permanently? So technology needs to do a better job there. We as a society need to prosecute and find many of these criminals and make an example. You know, in the Yahoo hacks, we finally caught certain individuals, and maybe that's a deterrent. But for every one we take out of the game, 10 more appear. And so, you know, I unless we can protect our own assets and every man for himself, it's very difficult to operate as a society. Unfortunately, that's just where we're at right now.
And well, if we look at, let me stick to this idea of smart security, secure technology. So I often think that it's pretty hard to rely on your intuition, because for example, if you meet somebody, I mean, the good guys, the bad guys are out there as well. So if you meet somebody, he might be very charming, right? But it might be a bad guy. So what do you have? At least might be some senses, some intuition, say something's fishy about this guy. But if I get an email that looks like an email, I don't have this intuition on a technology level. I don't have the technical experience to say it somehow looks strange, feels strange. So what do you think? Might artificial intelligence might be a means providing us, even if it's, a threat it's for itself? So who's giving us this intelligence security wise to help us?
You brought up a really interesting point, and that's intuition, right? You've gotten the email with the Nigerian prince offering to wire $2 million to your bank account. You know it's a scam. Your intuition tells you right away. So if that's the case, why do these emails still exist? They exist because they still work. It's baffling. It's
crazy,
amazing. It's crazy. And the reason they are written so poorly and they look so obvious to you and I is because they want to select people like you and I out of the equation. You and I will see that email and know right away it's a scam. If it looks too close, too real, we may become a target. They will expend a lot of energy on us, and then we will say, okay, that really is fishy. I'm not giving my account details. So those attacks are still exist, and the emails are written so poorly so that they only find people that are very, very gullible and will part ways with their money. So candidly, intuition has gone a long way in terms of protecting us, right? Now, I think enough attacks have been highlighted in the news that you do question every email you receive, even if it's for just a short period of time. Some you expect, some you don't expect. Artificial intelligence is a very interesting technology, but it's very difficult to apply to certain things. And it's not the only silver bullet that's out there, we can't be a one-trick pony. There are security companies today that say they use machine learning to protect their customers. to me, that's just marketing buzzwords. It's not really deep learning. It's not really machine learning. It's very basic algorithms. And that's a problem because now we're saying, we're doing something that we're not, and there's a false hope. So I think there needs to be layers in security. Personally, at Malewarebytes with my mother, I use multiple layers. First of all, some training, an antivirus, a secure emailing platform so that she's not just using Yahoo and getting tons of spam and clicking on everything. Always having up-to-date software. So if you look at Windows 95, any basic attacker today can find a vulnerability in Windows 95 in 5 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Now imagine all of the innovation in terms of securing the platform that has happened with Windows 10 or Linux or Mac. It is now very difficult to find. The barrier to find these vulnerabilities is very difficult, which is why many of these criminals resort to actual social engineering and scare tactics. I think we, as software providers, developers, even hardware developers, we have learned our lesson and the lesson of others and started securing our platforms. And finding a zero-day vulnerability, for example, in an Apple product or in Google Chrome goes for millions of dollars today. That should tell you something that there's these bug bounties, that vulnerabilities are being found at a very small rate, which is great for us, and they trade on the black market for millions of dollars, which is bad for us, right? So I think technology has come a long way. There's still a lot more we can do, but now the criminals are recycling ideas that should have been solved 10 years ago, such as social engineering.
Okay, so maybe let's take a glimpse of the future, have a look to the next 5-7 years, whatever. So if we see even more aspects of life getting digitalized, for example, smart homes, it's getting closer, it's going to be aware in all of our aspects of life. Who, from your point of view, and it might be strange because you are running a software company, a software provider company, but who has the need to protect us? Is it the company, the commercial sector, bringing up better products who are going to save us, or what about governments? Is it something? Is it an aspect of regulation to say, a malware-free existence is a basic right? I mean, this is something you brought up from your personal history.
Right.
But who's in charge?
Yeah, good question. And the irony with IoT is security was applied very early on. So these IoT, Internet of Things, everything started becoming connected to the internet, my smartwatch, my thermostat, my refrigerator. And all of a sudden, hundreds of companies popped up all over the world saying we secure IoT devices, that car, that thermostat, and it was almost overzealous. Many of these companies didn't even have products. They didn't even have technology that would support many of these IoT devices. And so the irony here is, of course, I'm saying the world is done. We don't take cybersecurity very seriously, but when it came to IoT, we overapplied it, and maybe even desensitized the world. So the problem with IoT devices is they all run different platforms, they all run different software, and securing them with one solution is very difficult. Yeah. In fact, I believe that securing the router, which all of these devices connect through, is the most important. And I have a Google on-hub router, and its value proposition to the consumers is anything that flows through this will be protected. And so that doesn't vindicate the providers of these IoT devices. Barbie dolls should not be shipping with default admin and username and password credentials, because otherwise they can be used and weaponized, as we discussed at the keynote with the Mirai botnet. So I think it starts with the hardware providers of the actual IoT device. They need to make their platform secure, not have any backdoors, make their platform updatable automatically, force users to change any username and passwords. Then it's the routers. The routers that the traffic flows through need to have some basic security, also not be able to be compromised, and need to be updatable. And then I think there is a general direction in terms of regulation. I really do think saying if you ship a device with default username and password, you're in trouble is a very basic requirement that I think any company can implement rather quickly and would go a long way. So I think all of those are very would help the situation considerably.
Yeah. Last question to you referring as an IT security expert. If you think about the future, are you positive? Or is it just, I mean, the business opportunity, you see the potentials, I mean, the need, but it's more like a question to you as a person. Are you positive thinking about the future and the task that we're heading?
Yeah, I certainly think I am optimistic. You know, certain days I wake up and first thing I do is put my hand on my face and go, start shaking my head because you see the stupidest attack in the news that impacted tens of millions of people that could have been prevented with something very simple, such as changing a password once a month or once a year even. Yeah. So generally I'm optimistic, and with regards to the industry, I mean, I didn't enter cybersecurity because I wanted to make money. Yeah. That's a function of doing a great job for our customers who do think there's a need. I think generally we're heading in the right direction. Cybersecurity 10 years ago was a lot different than it is today, and more people are aware, and I think the private sector and even the public sector is putting a big focus on cybersecurity. So generally, I am optimistic. There are days where you read the news and go, they had a passwords file on their desktop with all the passwords to everything. Gee, I wonder what could have gone wrong.
Yeah, nothing probably. Yeah. Just one idea coming up to my mind. If we say that security is a basic need for our future world, let's think about, for example, Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. He said, well, it's profit, it's companies, it's Tesla, okay, but we have a vision to say we need to bring electric mobility to the market, and we don't wait for all these automotive companies to do it. So it's something which is a business, but from his starting point, he said, I have the money, I can do it. I don't have to earn money from year 2, 3, 4, so I can do it. Coming back to your company, can you imagine something like, getting up one day and say, I gonna bring secure software to each and everybody just because I want to save this problem. And if it's not making me the CEO of the biggest and most profitable company alive, well, maybe it's worth it beyond money. I mean, you're 27. What's your vision?
Yeah, it's a very tough question to answer. Malewarebytes was founded for that very purpose. And even today, if you have a computer that's acting weird, or you suspect there's an infection, or you just want to be safe, Malewarebytes is free. The only way we make money is if you want to protect yourself going forward. And the only reason we do that is because I have employees and server costs that I need to pay for. Fundamentally, and you can quiz me if you'd like, because anybody that emails me and says, I don't have money for a license key, I give free keys out for lifetime. So, as an entrepreneur, it's that battle of, I need to make payroll. I need to pay my employees who work 12, 14 hours a day sometimes. At the same time, I'm trying to, and this sounds glamorous, but save the world from these types of attacks, right? And I do think we have a different culture than many of the other cybersecurity companies. I think we are in an unfortunate business where fear is what motivates purchases. And I hate that. At the same time, I love when customers come to us and say, look, you've got the cheapest product and yet it's the most effective. Thank you so much for everything. We started off with donations and then evolved into this model. So I do think, deep down we are saving the world in some ways, and we see many businesses run our solution as well. And we don't go in with the stick. We try the carrot, and if it doesn't work, they will continue to abuse it. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Yeah. So, we cleaned up 250 million computers last year. I would hope that many of those are happy Malewarebytes users now, but I promise you 250 million people didn't pay, not even 1%. So, we are a public utility. We are a public service that everybody in the world uses.
So if you may look like 10 years from now.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Are you still CEO of Malewarebytes, fulfilling this vision, protecting the world from from ransomware and all the other bad guys?
Good question. I think the world is going to dramatically change in the next 10 years. When you look at Windows devices, Mac devices, Android devices, I think it's going to be less this laptop we're looking at, or the laptop in my bag, or the desktop. It's going to be more mobile and virtual reality, and heck, even maybe brain chips one day that let us communicate to the outside world, through that interface. And so it's very. It would be hard for me to speculate where innovation is going to go. It's and whether we enter hardware to protect, as a router, for example. Endpoint security is a short-lived business in the sense that we know it today. Windows and Mac and Android. And it's going to be, it's something we're already innovating for and testing the market with solutions around IoT devices. Is that the next wave, the next horizon? But I think the next 10 years, there's so much critical infrastructure running on Windows, on Mac, on Android that we still have a great market to go after. But that's the one thing that worries me as an entrepreneur is, what does 10 years look from now? It's going to be very different. And companies that produced paper products today have completely disappeared in lieu of digitalization, right? What's the next wave of innovation that I, as the CEO, need to focus on? And at the end of the day, it's how can I help that innovation? How can I secure that innovation? That's what we're focusing on.
Have you ever thought about going to politics?
Never. I can't. I'm not very political, if you know what I mean. And it's something I've thought about before, and I just seeing the state of politics in the U.S. globally. I'm a very direct person, and I just don't know if the public is that type of is ready for that type of politician. Nor do I think I could do it.
Yeah. Because it's well, definitely I can assure what you say. It's not the impression you get if you meet if I meet you in person, right? But on the other hand, it's the question: where are the buttons to push to become more effective than running a software company?
Yeah.
So if you talked about education, you talked about people's attitudes. We talk about regulation, of course. So and who's doing the regulation today? I mean, what is their profound know-how of IT security?
Regretfully, you're absolutely right, and many of the bills that were proposed, and I focus on the U.S. of course, but were proposed by individuals who had absolutely no cybersecurity experience. Yeah. We can talk about net neutrality. We can talk about a ton of topics that were introduced or were written by people who had no experience in the matter, and that's what scares me as well. Is how can that's like saying people going into war but having never served in the military. It's pushing pawns around, and that's just a foolish way of approaching this.
Yeah, and that's why I'm referring to it, because it definitely needs different people, different characters in maybe new ministries, a new way of educating people and spreading the news. Maybe it's not even software; it's just like technical. Talking about intuition, changing something. Right. And from my impression, if you see who's going to politics, young people. I mean, you're 27. Who's acting in politics, and what is their career? I mean, they are so much dependent on getting upwards, making the careers, being in charge. And
it's a lot of lawyers as well.
It's a lot of lawyers, and it's a lot of lobbying. It's a lot of
course.
Advisors, consultants, whatever, and who's bringing the good solutions really to public?
Yeah.
And if I see that, I'm not a political person myself, but I mean, we talk about law and regulation, and this is a very powerful tool. This is how Western democracies work, and if we get laws opening up backdoors for the secret services, or not not looking or laws not looking too far. I mean, this is a tough task as well. Then who should do it?
Yeah.
I mean, the lobbying won't do it.
Regulation is a very hairy topic, right? There's regulation that's used for good, or laws that are used for good, and let's just use one example: the issue with just a couple of days ago, where there was, of course, the travel ban itself, but then an evolution of that, where you may, if you're traveling from 8 different countries into the U.S., you may not bring a certain device in.
Yeah.
Now, do we think that's going to deter many people? I don't think so, but how much hassle is it going to create? So I think there needs to be a user experience in security. That's one thing that is never, ever considered, I think. If look at antivirus, the perception of antivirus is that, and why Malewarebytes is successful, is that antivirus is heavy, it's slowing me down, it's blocking everything that I need to do, so I'm going to disable it. And that's how Malewarebytes was born, is we didn't do any of that. On the other hand, look at the convenience that can be brought with digitalization in cybersecurity. Yeah. I'll take Estonia as one example. We have an office in Tallinn. They have e-residency, everything you can do online with a secure chip that you as an e-resident receive, and you plug in and it's encrypted. And the evolution of that country through good government legislature has been just thrilling to watch. I'm an e-resident of Estonia. Would you believe it or not? Right? Yeah. As a Polish born and then moved to the US. Now I'm e-resident of Estonia, which is just very interesting, I suppose. We had an employee move from out of Estonia and into another country. I won't say which, but everything was done with paper. Opening a bank account took 3-5 days. It was taking 20 years off of progress, and everything became inconvenient again, and I would argue even less secure.
Can you imagine a world running on blockchain without national borders? Like Liberland, do you know Liberland?
No.
Liberland is just a small piece of land where they have something like a lab. So it's a virtual state, but they have an ambassador already.
Sure.
And they run, Bitcoin is the official currency. They run on blockchain. They try to experiment with smart contracts. They're trying to do everything digitally.
Yeah.
And some would say it's an art project, whatever, but it's real, and it's working with the potentials of digital, and virtual technologies that we already have. So can you imagine, if you look to the future, something where blockchain really eliminates these national focused, centered, limited
I love the
thinkings.
idea. Yeah, I love the idea. Let's start with just finances running on Bitcoin or some other digital currency. I don't know if Bitcoin is the solution, but any digital currency that has a public ledger, what would that expose? Politicians getting paid under the table? Yeah. I mean, this would become too honest for the world to handle. And so I think any evolution into just that, the people in power, it's unfortunate, of course, the ones that can actually prohibit and block these things from happening are unfortunately in power. And so I think we're 50 to 100 years away, unfortunately, but I think it's a very interesting idea. You talk about blockchain in general and securing the blockchain. I think many don't even understand what the blockchain is, right? And I think we have a long way to go before we're there, but I do think something down that road, down that path, will help us be more secure when it comes to financials and so on. I do think so.
Yeah, I would love this, and and I would love to have more time. So let me speed up because it was a long day for you already. So at the end, let's focus a little bit on your company and your company culture and you as an entrepreneur. So what I was wondering is not so much where do you get these people from, how do you do recruiting, but you are a Silicon Valley company, right? And from the European perspective, regarding all these news coming from the Silicon Valley, having entrepreneurs traveling to learn the Silicon Valley mentality, mindset, whatever. You are a Silicon Valley company, yes and no.
Yes.
So how do you see the mainstream culture exported from the Silicon Valley, at least to Europe and maybe all over the world these days?
I think Silicon Valley is very interesting. I think it's very different than anywhere else, and it causes a lot of problems. I wouldn't call it toxic. I think a lot of great innovation happens in Silicon Valley. I came from Chicago. That's where I grew up. That's where I went to university. That's where I built the first version of the product. And then I had moved to Silicon Valley. And honestly, half the time I think about it, I would have started the company in Chicago. And the reason is the talent is incredibly expensive, which is fine. Which is fine. I'll pay for good talent. The problem is they're always chasing the next new idea. They always want to be founders and entrepreneurs. And that's great. I totally get it. I totally love it. I'm that mindset. But at the end of the day, a company runs on individual contributors, not people that desire to be managers every single day or CEOs of their own company. And so while we haven't had much attrition, we've also gone after a different personality. You see many of these companies have attrition 20% annual attrition. How do you grow a company if you lose 20% of your knowledge, your people every year? So I think it's completely overfunded. I think people come there with dreams and aspirations that are not met and churn and move to company, trying to get their next biggest paycheck. And I don't think you see that anywhere else in the world. And trying to export that culture, I think the reason it hasn't caught on is exactly that. And investors, they know it. They know that you're going to go spend all of the $20 million they gave you, and you're going to come back to them for more. And that to me is toxic because you make short-term decisions and spend on sales and marketing instead of engineering where I think money should be spent.
How would you describe your leadership model, your leadership, culture you run at Malewarebytes?
Can I swear?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. So our values are quite interesting. It's no bullshit. Mm-hmm. So we talked a little bit about politics. I refuse to play politics. There should be no personal agendas. That's how I act. I always, doesn't matter if it's the lowest ranking employee or the highest ranking employee. If they ask me a question, unless it's extremely confidential, like we're working on acquiring a company that I can't talk about, they will always get a no BS answer. So that's number one. Always learning. I think at some point, we are irrelevant every hour. So you need to be consuming new content and learning every hour. That's how the world moves at this pace. If I stop for just 6 months, there will be a competitor ready to take my money. And then the last one is don't fuck the customer. DFTC. If you ask anybody at Malewarebytes, what does that stand for? Customer always comes first. It doesn't mean the customer is always right. And we have fired customers, but we cannot screw our customers, if you know what I mean. I think that's who pays us, right? At the end of the day. And so why do we offer free remediation instead of charging $1 or $5 to fix your computer? At the end of the day, we believe we're helping the world. I did not pay to get infected. I should not have to pay to get disinfected. And that's, everybody has rallied behind that. So my leadership style, my personality falls back to all of those values that I just discussed. I think it's very laid back. It's customer focused. It's always trying to learn something new or teach something new to our staff, and being extremely transparent and open.
What would you say if I would call this conservative?
You'd call that conservative. Yeah. I'm moving to Germany then.
Yeah. Because if this is the way you do it, and obviously you do, we're talking about values, and it's nothing digital.
Right.
It's human-to-human behavior.
Yep, fair enough.
It's fair. This is what I say. If you talk to an old entrepreneur, maybe someone who is like 70, 80 years old, and you ask these guys how they funded and on what values they build up their empire, whatever, some of these answers sound pretty similar.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I think it's the right approach. 60% of the money we spend is on our people, almost 70%. So why would I discourage? Why would I act in such a way that would discourage? And you see this happen time and time again in the Bay Area, in the Valley, where CEOs, they get a big head. I've created a company worth so many millions. Who cares if nobody wants to work for you because you treat them in such a way? To me, it's obvious, and it's it's a clean slate that I started with. I was 14 when I started the company. How could you possibly have been exposed to other CEOs or other behaviors? And so I think it's an opportunity to have started from scratch. How do I treat the people that I want working for me, that have trusted me at age 16, 17, 18, 19, 20? None of those ages are even somebody you would, think is experienced. And so I treated them that way. And I think that's been the best thing I've done for the company.
I think this is great. And, it's up to me to say thank you for taking your time out of a long day. I found this is pretty inspiring. And if we think about, the world is in need of role models for the future as entrepreneurs, and regarding all the topics that we are facing in future, the security topics, I think Malewarebytes and Marcin Kleczynski is definitely addressed to focus to. So if some of our listeners want to get to know more or just get in contact with you, so where would you address them to?
Yeah, this is the other thing. Anybody that sends me an email, I always respond to, but Twitter's very easy. It's just Marcin Kleczynski. My email is marcin@kleczynski.com. Also very simple. If you can figure out the spelling of my last name, that's the easiest way to get a hold of me, and I always promise a response, whether it be around security, entrepreneurship, or just somebody to talk to, I suppose.
Great. So we wish you all the best for Malewarebytes, and hope to meet again.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's always great to do live recordings right in the middle of hundreds of people like we did on Seabed Ground this year. I'm gonna say thank you all for listening. Special thanks to Thomas Mosch, head of the Seabed Global Conferences, for letting us doing the cherry picking for Neuwerts FM. And please see our show notes on neuwerts.fm/transformer/041 for further links and pictures. And stay tuned when we publish episode 042 with special guest Dr. Sandra Wachter on ethical design of algorithms and artificial intelligence. Yeah, this is going to be a topic definitely worth to be discussed about. So the release date will be Monday. Yes, Monday the 10th of April, 5 days earlier than usually because of the approaching Easter holiday. So you will have time to listen to this episode, and I'm gonna say ciao, take care, and happy transformation.